Every story has a lesson, and every lesson can change a life. Welcome back, my friends. Today, I want to take you on a journey that feels both deeply personal and universally relatable. Life is full of lessons, and some of the most valuable ones do not come from textbooks, classrooms, or polished speeches. They arrive quietly, whispered through experience, carried by people who have walked long roads before us. Think about it for a moment. When was the last time you sat with someone older, perhaps a grandparent, a mentor, or even a stranger whose wrinkles held stories and truly listened? What you often discover in those conversations is not complex philosophy, but simple truths carved out of years, filled with laughter, heartbreak, mistakes, and second chances. These truths are raw, honest, and powerful, and they rarely get the attention they deserve. That is why today's story is all about the most honest life lessons no one really talks about. The kind of wisdom you can only gather by living, losing, healing, and growing. We live in a world full of noise. Social media constantly tells us what to want, how to live, and how fast we should be moving. Every swipe and scroll compares our lives to others, and before we know it, we feel like we are behind, not good enough, or worse, invisible. But what older generations teach us, if we are willing to listen, is that life is not a race, and meaning is not measured by numbers or trophies. Their advice feels timeless because it has been tested against reality. These are not theories. These are lessons forged in storms, sharpened by hardships, softened by love, and proven true by years of reflection. I remember one evening when I was at a crossroads in my own life, overwhelmed by choices and terrified of making the wrong move. I sat with my grandmother, a woman who had survived things I could hardly imagine: war, scarcity, rebuilding life from the ground up. I asked her what she thought about finding the right path. She smiled gently, shook her head, and said, "There is no single right path. There is only the one you choose and what you make of it." That sentence stayed with me ever since. It did not come from a book or a conference stage. It came from a lifetime of living, and it shifted the way I saw my own journey. That is the kind of wisdom we will explore together today, the kind that can change how we view ourselves and the roads ahead. So why should you stay with me until the very end? Because in the next moments, you will hear lessons that might reframe your struggles, reshape your goals, and remind you of your resilience. These are not just empty phrases. They are the kinds of truths that can remind you that some of the best days of your life have not even happened yet. Imagine that the best chapters of your story are still waiting to be written, and if that does not make you want to keep going, I do not know what will. Now, as we begin, I want to invite you to listen with an open heart. Some lessons may sound simple, but do not underestimate simplicity. Often, the simplest truths hold the greatest weight. Some lessons might feel uncomfortable because they challenge the way we have been living, but discomfort is where growth begins. And then there will be lessons that make you smile, because deep down you already knew them, you just needed a reminder. Life lessons are like seeds. You do not always see growth immediately, but they settle quietly in your mind and bloom later, often when you least expect them. That is why stories matter, and why the wisdom of those who've lived before us carries such power. They are not here to dictate how we live. They are here to show us that no matter what path we walk, we are not walking it alone. Today, we will explore ideas like why rejection can sometimes be redirection, why comparison is the thief of joy, why self-talk is more powerful than anything others say about us, and why mistakes are not proof of failure, but proof that we are trying. These are lessons that can't be captured in motivational quotes alone. They come alive through reflection, through real stories, and through our willingness to see them as opportunities to grow. So let us imagine this video as a long conversation at a quiet table, where time slows down and wisdom flows freely. Let us imagine we are sitting with voices older than ours, voices that do not judge but gently guide. And let us lean in, because sometimes the smallest sentence, spoken softly, can light up the darkest road. By the end of this journey, you won't just take away advice, you will carry with you something far more valuable, a reminder that your story is still unfolding, your strength is greater than you believe, and your future is brighter than you can see right now. So let us begin this exploration of life's most honest lessons, the kind no one really talks about, but everyone needs to hear. One of the most powerful lessons, shared by people who have lived long lives, is this: every rejection is not the end of something good, but often the beginning of something better. At first, this idea feels almost impossible to accept. When you are in the middle of being turned down, left out, or overlooked, it hurts. It feels like a closed door, a failure, or a loss. But with time, you start to realize that rejection is rarely the final word. It is simply a redirection. Think about the moments in your own life when you wanted something badly but did not get it. Maybe it was a job you thought was perfect, a school you dreamed of attending, or a relationship you hoped would last forever. At the time, the no felt unbearable, but later, when you look back, you often see the bigger picture. You realize that if you had stayed where you thought you belonged, you might have missed out on experiences that shaped you, opportunities that made you stronger, or people who were truly meant to walk with you. Rejection is not a wall. It is a signpost pointing you down another road. Let me share a story to bring this to life. There is a man named Steve Jobs. Perhaps you have heard of him. In the 1980s, he was fired from the very company he had founded, Apple. Imagine the humiliation, the pain, the sense of failure. He later admitted it devastated him. But in that period of rejection, he began exploring other ventures. He created a company called Next, and he bought a small animation studio that would eventually become Pixar. That rejection forced him into new territory where he created some of the most beloved films of our time, and years later returned to Apple to lead it to historic success. Without that painful rejection, the story of Apple, and perhaps even modern technology, would look very different. Of course, not everyone's story is as dramatic as Steve Jobs. Sometimes the lessons are much quieter. I know someone who applied to a university 3 times and was rejected each time. Heartbroken, she decided to study at a smaller school closer to home. There, she met professors who supported her, discovered passions she did not know she had, and even met her lifelong partner. At the time, rejection felt like the end of her dreams. Looking back, she sees it as the start of a new, better life than the one she imagined. Older people often remind us of this because they have seen patterns repeat again and again. They have seen doors close and windows open. They have seen how time has a way of revealing the true meaning of rejection. They know that what feels like a painful ending today might be the exact turning point that leads you to where you are supposed to be. But here's the hard part. When we are in the middle of rejection, our minds tell us stories. We start to believe that we are not good enough, that we failed, that we do not deserve more. And that is where wisdom steps in. The older generation reminds us that rejection is not a verdict on our worth. It is just part of life's navigation system. A no does not mean never. It often means not here or not yet. Let us take another example. J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, was rejected by multiple publishers before her book finally found a home. Today, her stories have touched millions across the world. What if she had given up after the first rejection, or the 5th, or the 10th? Every no pushed her closer to the right. Yes, and that is the truth about rejection. it is rarely the end of the road. More often, it is a curve, a bend, or even a hidden shortcut. And sometimes, the rejection is about protection. Think about a relationship that ended, one you desperately wanted to keep. At the time, it felt unbearable. But later, when you looked back, you saw how toxic it was, how much of yourself you were losing. That rejection, painful as it was, saved you. It gave you the freedom to grow into who you really are and to prepare you for someone who could truly appreciate you. A rejection is not just about what you lose, it is about what you gain. You gain resilience, the ability to stand back up. You gain clarity, realizing what really matters. And most importantly, you gain direction. You are pushed onto a path that you might never have chosen for yourself, but one that ultimately reveals more beauty and meaning. Of course, it is not easy to see this truth in the moment. When you are turned down from a job, left out of a group, or told no by someone you love, it feels like failure. But if you can step back, breathe, and trust the process, you begin to realize that rejection is often the universe's way of saying, I have something else planned for you. Older people often smile when they say this lesson because they have lived long enough to connect the dots. They know that life is not a straight line. It is full of twists, detours, and unexpected turns. And sometimes the very thing that breaks your heart today is the thing that saves you tomorrow. So the next time you feel rejected, I invite you to remember this. You are not being pushed away. You are being redirected. One day, you will look back and realize that the path you are walking now, the one you thought was second choice, was the path that shaped you into who you were always meant to be. Rejection does not mean your story is over. It means a new chapter is about to begin. One of the most profound lessons we often overlook is this: when you find yourself in a dark place, it does not always mean you have been buried. Sometimes it means you have been planted. The difference between being buried and being planted is perspective. When something is buried, it is hidden away, forgotten, and left to decay. But when something is planted, it is given a chance to grow, to break through the soil, and to reach the light. In life, it is easy to confuse these two feelings. When everything seems to fall apart, when you are facing rejection, heartbreak, or setbacks, you might believe you have been buried. You feel the weight of the world pressing down on you. But if you look closer, you will realize that many of those moments are not endings, they are beginnings. That weight pressing down is often the soil preparing you to grow roots deep enough to hold you steady when your time to bloom arrives. Take a simple example from nature. A seed must first disappear into the darkness of the earth before it can sprout. It does not grow under the sunlight immediately. It begins its journey in silence, surrounded by dirt, in an environment that feels suffocating. But inside that darkness, transformation is happening. The shell breaks open, new life emerges, and before long, a small green shoot pushes through the surface. What looked like the end was actually the start of something miraculous. People who have lived long lives understand this because they have seen it happen again and again. They know that the lowest points of life often prepare us for the highest ones. They have seen careers collapse only to lead to reinvention. They have seen relationships end only to clear the way for healthier love. They have seen health challenges that at first felt devastating, but later awakened gratitude, strength, and a new way of living. Let me share a real-life story. There was a young man named Howard Schultz who grew up in poverty in Brooklyn, New York. His family struggled, and he often felt like life had buried him under hardship. But instead of letting those circumstances define him, he treated them as soil in which to grow resilience. Years later, Schultz became the CEO of Starbucks, transforming it into a global brand. He often credits his difficult childhood for teaching him empathy, vision, and the drive to create opportunities for others. What looked like darkness at the time was actually the planting ground for his future. On a smaller scale, I once knew a woman who went through a painful divorce. She felt like she had been buried by shame and loneliness, convinced her story was over, but in those years of rebuilding, she discovered passions she had ignored: painting, traveling, learning. She met new friends, created a career she loved, and slowly, like a flower breaking through soil, she bloomed. Looking back, she realized that her darkest chapter had been the foundation of her most beautiful one. The wisdom here is clear. Darkness is not always destruction. Sometimes it is preparation. Think about your own life. Maybe you have gone through seasons when nothing seemed to make sense. You felt stuck, abandoned, or hopeless. But later, when you reflected, you saw how those exact moments taught you patience, resilience, and perspective. Without those lessons, you might not be the person you are today. Of course, when you are in the middle of the darkness, this is hard to believe. You can't see the growth happening beneath the surface. All you feel is the weight. But this is where older voices remind us to hold on, to trust the process, and to believe that seasons change. The seed does not break the surface overnight. It takes time. Growth always takes time. And here's something beautiful. Even when you feel planted in the dark, you are not alone. All of us, at some point, go through seasons of darkness. It may be losing a job, struggling with identity, facing failure, or carrying grief. These experiences connect us. They remind us that growth often requires discomfort. Just as a seed must break before it grows, we too must sometimes break to discover new strength. Think about Thomas Edison. Before inventing the light bulb, he faced thousands of failed attempts. Each failure could have felt like burial. But he famously said, "I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Those dark trials planted the foundation for one of history's greatest inventions. So, how do we apply this lesson in our lives? The next time you feel overwhelmed, try asking yourself, am I buried or am I planted? The difference lies in hope. Buried means forgotten. Planted means potential. Buried means the end. Planted means the beginning. And often it is only our perspective that determines which one we believe. This lesson teaches us patience, trust, and the ability to see beyond the moment. Just because you can't see the sunlight now does not mean it is not there. Just because you are surrounded by darkness does not mean growth is not happening. In fact, many people look back on the hardest seasons of their lives and say, that was when I discovered who I really was. Strength is not built in comfort. Resilience is not born from ease. These qualities are forged in the shadows, in the struggles, in the nights when you wanted to give up but did not. So if you are in a season of darkness right now, take heart. You are not buried. You are planted, and one day, maybe sooner than you think, you will break through the surface, stronger, wiser, and more beautiful than before. Because the truth is this: life does not just happen to us. It happens for us. And sometimes, the soil we fear is the soil that will grow our roots deepest and our branches tallest. One of the most damaging habits we fall into is comparing ourselves to others. It happens so naturally we hardly even notice it. You scroll through social media and see someone younger than you driving a nicer car, traveling the world, or achieving career milestones you dream about. You hear about friends getting promotions, buying houses, or starting families, and suddenly, instead of feeling happy for them, you feel small. This quiet voice creeps in. Why not me? Why am I behind? Why do not I have what they have? But here's the truth, and it is one of the clearest lessons older generations often repeat. Comparison steals joy. It robs us of peace, blinds us to our own progress, and makes us believe we are less than we truly are. Think about the sun and the moon, they never shine at the same time in the same way. The sun rules the day, the moon rules the night. Each has its own place, its own purpose, and its own beauty. Imagine how absurd it would be if the moon complained, "I do not shine as brightly as the sun," or if the sun sighed, "I wish I glowed as gently as the moon." The truth is, both are necessary. Both light the world in their own unique way, and so do we. Let me share a story that captures this. I once knew two young artists, both incredibly talented. One found success early. Her paintings were displayed in galleries by the time she was in her 20s. The other struggled, working side jobs, selling pieces slowly, feeling invisible. She constantly compared herself to her friend and nearly gave up. But she did not. She kept painting, experimenting, finding her own style. Years later, her unique approach caught attention, and she found herself celebrated not for painting like anyone else, but for creating in her own voice. Looking back, she realized that if she had quit because she compared her path to her friends, the world would have missed out on her gift. That is what comparison does. It convinces us that someone else's success is proof of our failure. But that is not true. Someone else's light does not dim yours. Just because the sun shines does not mean the moon is unnecessary. Older people know this deeply because they have seen how life unfolds over decades. They have watched people who seemed ahead in their 20s burn out or lose their way, and others who seemed behind bloom later and build meaningful lives. They have seen how unpredictable journeys can be and how dangerous it is to measure yourself against someone else's timeline. Think about Colonel Sanders, the founder of KFC. He was rejected countless times and only found success in his 60s. Compare him to someone who peaked in their 20s but faded by 40. Who is truly ahead? The answer is neither. They simply had different paths. The danger of comparison is that it narrows our vision. It makes us so focused on what others are doing that we forget to nurture our own journey. We stop watering our own garden because we are too busy staring at our neighbors. And what happens? Their flowers bloom, ours wither, and we mistakenly believe it is because they are better. In reality, it is because we abandoned our own growth. Social media has made this even harder. It is like a highlight reel of everyone else's lives, vacations, weddings, new jobs, smiling faces. But what we do not see are the struggles, the failures, the nights of doubt. We compare our behind the scenes with someone else's stage performance, and of course we feel like we are losing, but older voices remind us you cannot compare your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20. Everyone's book unfolds differently. Here's another perspective. Comparison does not just steal joy, it steals gratitude. When we are focused on what others have, we forget what we already hold in our hands. You might envy your friend's job, but someone else envies your health. You might envy someone's relationship, but someone else envies your freedom. Gratitude turns what we have into enough, but comparison blinds us to it. Let me tell you about a man I met at a small community event. He had worked as a teacher his entire life. He was not wealthy, he did not have a big house or fancy car, but when he spoke, his eyes lit up. He talked about the generations of students he taught, the lives he touched, and the joy he felt in shaping young minds. He said, "I may not have what others call success, but I have peace, and that is priceless." Listening to him, I realized he was richer in joy than many millionaires I have seen. He did not waste his life comparing. He spent it contributing. The lesson is simple. When you stop comparing, you start living. You see your own progress more clearly. You celebrate your own victories, no matter how small. You find peace in your pace, even if it does not match anyone else's. So how do we resist the trap of comparison? The first step is awareness. Notice when you feel envy rising, when you are scrolling and suddenly feel worse about yourself. Pause. Remind yourself that their path is not your path. The second step is gratitude. Write down 3 things you are thankful for each day. Gratitude and comparison cannot live in the same heart. And the third step is focus. Pour your energy into your own growth, your own story. When you water your own garden, it blooms. At the end of the day, joy is not found in outshining others. It is found in becoming the best version of yourself. The sun does not try to be the moon. The moon does not try to be the sun. And neither should we. So the next time you feel the sting of comparison, remember this: your timing is your own. Your light is your own. You are not late. You are not behind. You are right where you are meant to be, preparing for your own moment to shine. If there is one voice we cannot escape in this life, it is our own. From the moment we wake up to the moment we fall asleep, our minds are filled with words, judgments, and quiet conversations we rarely share with anyone else. And while it might seem like those whispers are harmless, the truth is, the way we speak to ourselves shapes our entire reality. Many older people will tell you this. It is not what others say about you that truly defines your life, but what you repeatedly say to yourself when no one else is listening. You might be praised by 1,000 people, but if your inner voice says, "I am not enough," you will never feel content. Conversely, you might face criticism and doubt from the world, but if your inner voice says, "I can handle this," "I am capable," you will find strength to rise above. Let us take an example from sports. Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest boxers of all time, did not just train his body, he trained his mind. He repeatedly told himself and the world, "I am the greatest." At first, people thought it was arrogance, but what he was really doing was programming his mind to believe in his potential. His self-talk created a mindset of resilience that carried him through battles in and out of the ring. But self-talk does not always come in the form of grand declarations. More often, it is subtle. It is the voice that says, "You are going to fail" right before an exam, or "You are not attractive enough" when you look in the mirror, or "You will never be successful" when you dream of something bigger. Over time, those whispers dig grooves in our minds, and we start to live as if they are facts. The problem is not that others doubt us. It is that we internalize those doubts and turn them into our own narrative. I once knew a young woman who grew up hearing negative words from people around her. Teachers told her she was not smart enough. Family members told her she was too shy to succeed. Eventually, those voices became her own. She told herself the same things until she believed them. For years, she settled for less, too afraid to try. Then one day, she stumbled upon a simple exercise. For 30 days, she wrote down one positive statement about herself every morning. At first, it felt fake, but slowly she began to believe it. "I am capable of learning. I am worthy of love. I am stronger than I think." Over time, those whispers reshaped her mindset. Today, she is thriving in a career she once thought was impossible, all because she changed her self-talk. This is why older generations emphasize the importance of being careful with the words we feed ourselves. They have lived long enough to realize that the battles of life are not only external, they are internal. You can face poverty, failure, heartbreak, and setbacks, but if your inner voice says, "I will not give up," you will find a way through. But if your inner voice says, "I can't," then even the smallest challenge becomes a mountain. Think about it like this. Your self-talk is like a compass. If it always points toward negativity, you will keep walking in circles of doubt and fear. But if it points toward encouragement, resilience, and possibility, you will walk steadily toward growth. Psychologists call this concept self-fulfilling prophecy. If you tell yourself you are unlucky, you will unconsciously avoid opportunities and prove yourself right. If you tell yourself you are capable, you will take risks, try harder, and create results that reinforce that belief. The mind listens to what we tell it, so we must speak wisely. Another story illustrates this perfectly. Jim Carrey, before he became a famous actor, wrote himself a check for $10 million for acting services rendered. He dated it years into the future and carried it in his wallet. He did not know how it would happen, but he told himself every day that he was destined for something greater. Years later, when his career exploded, he was paid that exact amount for a film role. Now, was it magic? Not exactly. It was self-talk, fueling belief, and belief fueling relentless effort. But let us be honest. Speaking kindly to ourselves is not easy. Our inner critic often shouts louder than our inner cheerleader, and society does not help. It constantly tells us we need to be richer, thinner, more successful, more perfect. That is why self-talk must be intentional. You do not wait for the positive whispers to come naturally. You plant them like seeds. Here's a simple practice you can try. Each morning, before you pick up your phone, stand in front of the mirror and say one encouraging thing to yourself. It can be as simple as, "I am learning," or "I am capable of handling today." Over time, this small ritual rewires your brain. Instead of starting the day with doubt, you start it with hope. Older people often smile when they talk about this because they realize something younger people often forget. Life is too short to be your own enemy. The world will always have critics. Don't add your own name to that list. Be the one voice that supports you, believes in you, and encourages you. So the next time you catch yourself whispering, "I can't," pause. Ask yourself, would I say this to someone I love? If the answer is no, then do not say it to yourself. Replace it with something better, because the truth is, the words you say in the quiet moments shape the loudest outcomes of your life. In the end, self-talk is not about pretending everything is perfect. It is about giving yourself permission to keep going, even when life feels imperfect. It is about whispering, "You can do this," until you believe it enough to try. Then once you try, you realize you could do it all along. If there is one truth that echoes through the voices of people who have lived long lives, it is this: our lives are not shaped by the things we dream of, but by the choices we make each day, big or small, visible or invisible. Each decision we take creates ripples that can change the course of our journey. We often imagine that change requires a grand event, a stroke of luck, or someone else's approval, but in reality, transformation is usually the result of a single choice. One small but powerful act of courage that shifts everything. Think about it. Where you are right now, listening to this, is the sum of countless choices: the subjects you studied in school, the friends you spent time with, the jobs you applied for, the risks you took or did not take. Each fork in the road shaped the person you are today. And the humbling but also empowering truth is this: at any moment, a new choice can redirect your entire path. Let us consider some famous examples. Oprah Winfrey grew up in poverty and hardship. At one point, she was working in a small television station, facing rejection after rejection, but she made a choice to use her voice authentically, to connect with people on a deeper level instead of following the cold, traditional style of broadcasters at the time. That choice to be real changed her career. It set her apart, built trust, and eventually transformed her into one of the most influential women in the world. Or consider Rosa Parks. One day in 1955, she made a simple choice to stay seated on a bus instead of giving up her seat. It might have seemed like a small personal act at the time, but that single decision sparked a movement, inspired millions, and helped change the course of history. Choices do not just affect us, they can inspire generations. But it is not only the famous who carry this truth. I knew a man who once felt trapped in a job he hated. Every day, He dragged himself to the office, convincing himself he had no other option. Then one afternoon, while walking home, he made a choice. Instead of going straight back to the same routine, he signed up for a night class in graphic design, a subject he had always loved but never pursued. That one decision led to a portfolio, then freelance projects, and eventually a full career shift. Today, he works creatively every day and often says, "My life changed because I finally made one choice for myself." Older people emphasize this because they see how much power we often give away. We wait for luck. We wait for someone else to say yes. We wait for the right timing. But life does not wait. They remind us that change is not something you stumble into. It is something you choose. And often, the hardest part is not the size of the decision, it is daring to make it. Of course, choices come with fear. What if we choose wrong? What if we fail? What if we regret it? These questions can paralyze us. But here's the truth. Not choosing is also a choice. And often, it is the one that keeps us stuck the longest. Older voices tell us that regret does not usually come from the choices we made. It comes from the choices we were too afraid to make. Take a moment to imagine. If you made one small decision today to step closer to the life you want, what would it be? Maybe it is choosing to have that difficult conversation you have been avoiding. Maybe it is choosing to apply for that job you think you are not ready for. Maybe it is choosing to say no where you always say yes. Or maybe it is choosing to believe in yourself for once instead of doubting. One decision can shift your entire trajectory. There is a saying, ships do not sink because of the water around them. They sink because of the water they let in. In the same way, it is not the world outside that shapes our lives most. It is the decisions we make inside ourselves. We choose what to let in, what to focus on, what to hold on to, and what to let go of. Sometimes choices are dramatic, like quitting a job or moving to a new country. Other times they are small, almost invisible. Choosing to smile instead of frown. Choosing to keep going when you feel like quitting. Choosing to forgive instead of holding bitterness. But over time, those small daily choices build into character, habits, and eventually destiny. One of the most inspiring reminders I have ever heard from an older mentor was this: life does not happen all at once. It happens decision by decision, and when you look back decades later, you see how even the tiniest choices, like who you sat next to in a classroom or whether you sent that one email, created entire chapters of your life. So here's the takeaway. Do not underestimate the power of a single choice. Don't wait for permission or for life to line up perfectly. You do not need to control everything. You just need to decide your next step. The path unfolds when you walk it. As you listen to this, maybe you are at a crossroads right now. Maybe you are unsure which way to go. Let this be the encouragement you need. Trust yourself. Choose growth over comfort. Choose action over fear. Choose progress over perfection. Even if the road feels uncertain, remember, every great journey begins with one decision to start walking. Because at the end of the day, our lives are not written in stone, they are written in choices. And every choice has the power to create change. When we look back on our lives, the moments that sting the most are often the mistakes we made and the nights we spent worrying about things we could not control. We replay conversations in our heads, regret decisions, and imagine alternate versions of our lives if only we had done things differently. But older people, those who have lived long enough to connect the dots, often tell us something surprising. Mistakes are not failures. They are lessons, and most of the things we spend sleepless nights worrying about never even happen. It is human to fear making mistakes. From childhood, many of us are taught to avoid failure at all costs. In school, red marks on an exam felt like evidence of our worth. At work, A misstep could feel like career-ending shame. In relationships, mistakes can leave scars we carry for years. But here's the truth. Mistakes are not the opposite of success. They are part of the road to it. Every successful person, every wise elder, every inspiring story you know is filled with mistakes that paved the way to growth. Take Thomas Edison as an example. He famously said, "I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Each failure was a stepping stone toward creating the light bulb. Without those mistakes, there would have been no breakthrough. Imagine if he had stopped after the first 100 tries, or even the first 1,000. The world would be darker, literally. Or consider Michael Jordan, often regarded as the greatest basketball player of all time. He once said, "I have missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I have lost almost 300 games. I have failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." His greatness was not in avoiding mistakes. It was in learning from them and continuing anyway. But mistakes are not limited to famous figures. They live in our everyday lives. I once knew a young man who started a small business that failed within a year. He lost money, time, and confidence. For a while, he believed the mistake defined him, that he was not cut out for entrepreneurship. But as the years passed, he realized that experience taught him lessons no textbook could. He learned about managing people, handling finances, and understanding customers. When he tried again years later, those early mistakes became his greatest assets, and this time, his business thrived. The wisdom here is simple. Mistakes hurt in the short term, but strengthen in the long term. They remind us that we are moving, experimenting, reaching beyond our comfort zones. The only people who do not make mistakes are the ones who never try. And is not that the bigger tragedy? To live safely, never failing, but also never growing. Now let us talk about worry. If mistakes are the ghosts of the past, worry is the shadow of the future. We worry about what people think of us, about whether we will succeed, about losing things we have not even gained yet. Anxiety grows when we try to control the uncontrollable, but older voices remind us that most of the things we worry about never come true. The conversations we dread often turn out fine. The disasters we imagine never arrive. And the moments we fear most usually pass more quickly than we expect. I remember hearing an older gentleman say worry is like paying interest on a debt you do not owe. That struck me deeply. We exhaust ourselves carrying imaginary burdens, as if worrying could prevent pain. But in truth, worry only steals today's peace without protecting tomorrow. One story illustrates this beautifully. A woman once worried endlessly about losing her job. Every day she feared being laid off, so much so that she stopped enjoying the work she still had. Years passed, and she realized she had wasted so much energy worrying about something that never happened. Eventually, when she did choose to leave her job, it was on her own terms, and she regretted how much joy she had lost to unnecessary fear. This does not mean worry is useless. It can alert us to prepare, to plan, to take precautions, but when it becomes constant, it paralyzes us. The wisdom is not to eliminate worry completely, but to put it in its place. Plan for the future, but do not live in it. Mistakes teach us to be resilient. Worry teaches us to be present. So what can we do? First, reframe mistakes. Instead of saying, "I failed," say, "I learned." Write down what each mistake taught you, and you will see they were not dead ends, but detours leading you to new skills. Second, challenge your worries. When fear rises, ask yourself, will this matter in 5 years? Most of the time, the answer is no. Third, replace worry with action. If you are afraid of failing an exam, study harder. If you are afraid of losing a job, Build your skills. Action dissolves fear, while inaction feeds it. Older people often look back and laugh at the things they once worried about. They shake their heads and say it was not worth all that stress. That is not because their problems were not real. It is because, with time, perspective shifts, the mountain of today becomes the pebble of tomorrow. So the next time you make a mistake, do not treat it as proof of weakness. Treat it as evidence that you are alive, that you are trying, that you are human. And the next time worry grips you, remind yourself, you do not have to carry the weight of tomorrow today. At the end of life, people do not regret their mistakes as much as they regret their missed chances. They do not regret the exams they failed or the jobs they did not land. They regret the words they never said, the risks they never took, the dreams they never chased. Mistakes and worries are part of the process, but they are not the destination. They are simply teachers guiding us toward growth. So hold this close. Mistakes are not the end, they are beginnings. Worries are not predictions. They are illusions. And both can be transformed into wisdom if you allow yourself to learn. One of the hardest lessons in life, and one that older generations speak of with both sadness and wisdom, is about relationships and boundaries. Human beings are wired for connection. We long to belong, to be loved, and to share our lives with others. But as we grow older, we realize something both painful and liberating. Not everyone we meet is meant to stay forever. Some people come into our lives to teach us lessons. Others bring joy, encouragement, and support. And still others show us what we must learn to avoid. When we are young, we often think that every friendship will last forever, every love will be eternal, and every group we belong to will always include us. But as the years pass, life shows us otherwise. People drift apart, priorities change. Sometimes people hurt us in ways we never expected, and sometimes we discover that holding on to certain relationships is not an act of love, but of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of change, fear of loss. Older voices remind us of this. It is not unkind to let go. In fact, letting go is sometimes the most loving choice you can make for yourself and for the other person. Life is like an elevator, they say. On the way up, you have to stop and let some people off. If you try to take everyone with you, the weight will be too heavy and the elevator won't rise. Take a simple story. I once knew a woman who kept a circle of friends from high school well into adulthood. They had shared laughs, memories, and countless hours together. But as time went on, she realized that most of her friends only called when they needed something, rarely celebrated her wins, and often made her feel small. For years, she held on because of nostalgia. Then one day, she decided to set boundaries. She did not cut ties harshly, but she began to distance herself. Slowly, she built new friendships with people who genuinely cared about her growth. Looking back, she said, "The moment I stopped forcing people to stay was the moment I felt free." This is what boundaries do. They remind us that love does not mean self-sacrifice at all costs. Boundaries are not walls to shut people out. They are doors that allow the right people in and keep the wrong energy out. And with age, people realize that peace is worth more than forced connections. History also gives us examples of this. Think of Abraham Lincoln. During his political career, he faced betrayal, opposition, and constant criticism. Yet, he was careful about who he kept close. He surrounded himself with people who challenged him but also respected him, people who did not always agree but who had integrity. His boundaries helped him focus on leading a divided nation through its darkest hours. Without those boundaries, his leadership might have collapsed under the weight of toxic influence. But what makes relationships so complicated is that we often confuse loyalty with obligation. We believe that because someone has been in our lives for a long time, they must stay forever. Older people, however, smile and say, time alone does not prove loyalty. Actions do, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to walk away from someone you once thought you could not live without. Of course, letting go is not easy. It hurts. It feels like failure, but over time, you begin to realize that endings make space for new beginnings. By releasing what no longer serves you, you create room for healthier, richer, more meaningful relationships. It is like pruning a tree. Cutting away certain branches may feel painful, but it allows new growth to flourish. Another story comes from a mentor of mine. He used to say, the family you create is more important than the family you come from. At first, I did not understand, but as I watched him, I realized what he meant. Blood ties can be important, but they do not excuse toxic behavior. Sometimes, the people who share your DNA may hurt you the most, while the friends you choose become the true family who uplift you. Boundaries here are not about rejection, they are about survival and self-respect. So how do we apply this wisdom? First, pay attention to how people make you feel. Do they leave you drained or energized? Do they celebrate your growth or secretly hope you fail? The answers reveal who deserves a place in your inner circle. Second, learn to say no without guilt. No is not cruelty, it is clarity. Third, remember that walking away is not about anger or pride. It is about choosing peace, growth, and alignment with your values. Older people often say that as they aged, their circle grew smaller, but their joy grew larger. They realized they did not need dozens of friends. They needed a handful of true ones. They did not need approval from everyone. They needed love from the right ones. And that is a truth worth remembering. Quality always outweighs quantity. In the end, relationships and boundaries teach us one of life's most vital lessons. You cannot carry everyone with you. Some people are chapters, not the whole book. Some are teachers, not lifelong companions. And that is okay. Your journey is unique, and not everyone is meant to walk it to the end. So the next time you feel guilty about letting someone go, remember this. It is not rejection. It is redirection. By closing one door, you open space for another. By honoring your boundaries, you protect your peace. And by choosing who stays in your life, you shape not only your present, but also your future. Because the truth is simple. You are not obligated to keep everyone. You are only obligated to protect your own soul and to surround yourself with those who help you grow. Fear is often painted as the enemy. From the time we are children, we are told not to be afraid, not to be nervous, not to let fear stop us. Yet, if you listen to older people who have lived long enough to reflect with clarity, they will tell you something very different. Fear is not always a sign to stop. Sometimes, fear is proof that you are on the edge of growth. Nervousness does not mean you are weak. It means you are stepping into new territory. And that is exactly where change begins. Think about the first time you did something that mattered. Maybe it was standing in front of a classroom to give a presentation. Your palms were sweaty, your voice shaky, and your heart raced. Or maybe it was going to a job interview, confessing your feelings to someone you loved, or moving to a new city. In those moments, fear was loud. But what happened? Once you pushed through, you grew. You gained confidence. You discovered strength you did not know you had. That is the paradox of fear. It feels like a warning, but often it is an invitation. Take an inspiring example. Nelson Mandela. He spent 27 years in prison, and when he was finally released, he faced the terrifying challenge of leading a divided South Africa into a new era. Imagine the fear, the uncertainty, the pressure. But Mandela once said, "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." His nerves did not mean he was not ready. They meant he was human. And by walking through fear, he became one of history's most enduring symbols of resilience and leadership. On a smaller scale, I once met a young woman who wanted to start her own bakery. She had a steady office job, and the thought of leaving that safety terrified her. She worried about failing, about disappointing her family, about losing money, but the idea of not trying scared her even more. One day, she decided to take the leap. The first months were filled with fear, late nights, mistakes, and plenty of nerves. But slowly, customers came, her confidence grew, and today she runs a thriving business. Looking back, she laughs and says, "The nerves were the sign I was alive, that I was chasing something real." Older people often tell us that nerves are a compass. If you feel nothing, no fear, no excitement, maybe you are not stretching yourself, but if you feel butterflies in your stomach, trembling in your hands, or doubt in your mind, that is the place where growth happens. It is like a rocket launch. Scientists remind us that 90% of a rocket's fuel is burned in the first few minutes of liftoff. The hardest part is not cruising in space, it is breaking free from gravity. In the same way, the hardest part of growth is the beginning, when fear is strongest. Once you push through, momentum carries you forward. But let us be clear, not all fear is equal. Some fear is a genuine warning, like standing too close to the edge of a cliff or ignoring your health. That kind of fear protects you, but the fear we are talking about here is the one that rises when you are stepping into the unknown, chasing a dream, or daring to change your life. That fear is not a stop sign. It is a green light. Another famous example is J.K. Rowling. Before she published Harry Potter, she was a single mother living on welfare, nervous about sharing her writing with the world. She was rejected by multiple publishers. Each rejection made her fear louder. What if I am not good enough? But she kept going. That nervousness was proof of her passion, and today her books have inspired millions. If she had let nerves silence her, the world would never have known her stories. So how can we use fear as fuel instead of letting it paralyze us? The first step is to reframe it. Instead of saying, "I am afraid, so I should not do this," try saying, "I am afraid, so this must matter." Fear means your heart is invested. It means you care about the outcome, and that is a beautiful thing. The second step is small action. Don't wait for fear to disappear before moving forward. It won't. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward despite it. Take small steps, and each one will quiet the nerves a little more. The third step is reflection. Look back on your life and recall the times you were afraid but did it anyway. Notice how those are the moments you grew the most. Use that memory as evidence that fear is not your enemy, it is your ally. Older voices remind us that fear is temporary, but regret is forever. They will tell you stories of chances they did not take, not because they could not, but because they were afraid. And those are the memories that sting the most. Not the mistakes, not the failures, but the what-ifs. So the next time you feel nervous before a big decision, smile. Recognize that your nerves mean you are alive, that you are pushing your limits, that you are stepping into a chapter that could change your story. And when you feel fear rising, do not run from it. Walk with it, because on the other side of fear is growth, and on the other side of nerves is the life you have been waiting to live. In the end, fear is not a wall. It is a doorway. When you step through it, trembling hands and all, you find that you are stronger, braver, and more capable than you ever believed. If there is one thing older people emphasize again and again, it is this: time changes the way you see everything. The things that feel impossible today The wounds that feel unbearable, the worries that consume your mind given time, they look different. Maybe they do not vanish completely, but with patience and perspective, they soften. They transform from storms into lessons, from weights into stepping stones. When we are young, we want everything fast. We want success now, love now, clarity now. Waiting feels like punishment. Patience feels like weakness. But ask someone who has lived for decades, and they will tell you, nothing worthwhile grows overnight. Just as it takes years for a tree to bear fruit, it takes time, patience, and perspective for life to reveal its deeper meaning. Let us consider a story. I once knew a man who lost his job unexpectedly. At first, he was crushed. He had bills to pay, a family to support, and he felt like a failure. Weeks turned into months, and anxiety grew. But with time, he found a new opportunity, one that paid better, matched his skills more closely, and gave him more time with his family. Looking back, he realized losing his job had been a blessing in disguise. At the time, all he saw was loss. With perspective, he saw redirection. This is why patience is so vital. When we are in the middle of hardship, all we can see is the pain, but when we give life time to unfold, we discover layers we could not see before. It is like looking at a painting up close. You notice only messy brushstrokes. Step back, and suddenly the full picture emerges. Think about Nelson Mandela again. 27 years in prison, nearly 3 decades of waiting, of patience, of enduring the unendurable. In the moment, it must have felt endless. But with time, his perspective deepened. He used those years not to wither, but to grow in wisdom, to prepare for leadership. When he finally walked free, he carried not bitterness, but vision. His patience turned suffering into preparation for history, making change. Closer to everyday life, consider heartbreak. When someone you love leaves, it feels like the world has ended. The days crawl by, each one heavy. But talk to an older person who has survived heartbreak, and they will smile gently and say, give it time. One day you will look back and understand why it ended. And they are right. With patience, we begin to see that endings create space for beginnings. That love lost teaches us how to love better. That time does not erase the pain, but it helps us carry it with grace. Patience is not just about waiting. It is about how you wait. Many of us wait with resentment, constantly checking the clock, demanding answers. But patience with perspective is different. It is trusting that time is a teacher. It is allowing space for growth without forcing outcomes. Older people often say, don't rush the season you are in. Just as winter cannot become spring overnight, your life unfolds in its own rhythm. Rushing only robs you of the lessons hidden in the waiting. One of the best examples comes from nature. Bamboo. For years after it is planted, bamboo shows almost no visible growth. You water it, nurture it, and wonder if anything is happening. Then suddenly, after years of waiting, it shoots up feet in just weeks. All that time underground, it was growing roots, preparing for rapid growth. That is how life works too. Sometimes the patience you endure is not wasted. It is preparation for breakthrough. Perspective is what makes patience meaningful. Without perspective, waiting feels empty. With perspective, waiting becomes growth. I once spoke to an elderly woman who said, when I was young, I thought heartbreaks and failures would kill me. Now I see they were simply chapters. I lived through them, I learned from them, and they gave me stories worth telling. Time had softened her pain, but perspective had transformed it into wisdom. So what can we do to practice this lesson? First, remind yourself that what feels huge today may look small tomorrow. When you are overwhelmed, imagine your future self looking back, What will they see? Likely not a disaster, but a lesson. Second, embrace the season you are in. If it is winter in your life, do not curse the cold. Use it to rest, to grow roots, to prepare. Spring will come. Third, shift your perspective. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What is this teaching me?" That single shift can turn frustration into understanding. Older people often laugh at their younger selves, not because the struggles were not real, but because with time, they see how small those struggles were in the grand scheme of life. They realize that the heartbreak that felt unbearable at 20 was just one chapter in a long story. They see that the job they lost opened doors they did not even know existed. They understand that perspective is power, the power to transform pain into patience and patience into peace. So the next time life feels heavy, remember, time will soften it, patience will carry you through it, and perspective will reveal its meaning. You do not need all the answers right now. You just need to trust that tomorrow will look different, and one day you will look back at today and say, "That was when I grew." Because the truth is simple, time does not erase everything, but it teaches us how to see with new eyes. And with new eyes, even the hardest chapters can become the most meaningful. When we face adversity, our first instinct is often to ask, "Why me?" Hardship feels unfair, like a punishment handed down for reasons we cannot understand. But if you ask older people, those who have endured wars, losses, financial struggles, illnesses, and heartbreak, they will often tell you a different truth. Adversity is not a punishment. It is a teacher. It is life's way of shaping us, stretching us, and revealing strengths we never knew we had. Think about the hardest moments in your life. Perhaps it was losing a loved one, failing at something important, or feeling like everything you built was crumbling. In those moments, it felt unbearable. Yet, if you look back now, do not you also see how those trials changed you? Maybe they gave you resilience. Maybe they taught you compassion. Maybe they opened your eyes to what really matters. That is the paradox of adversity. It hurts, but it also transforms. Take the story of Helen Keller. At just 19 months old, she lost both her sight and hearing due to an illness. To most people, that would have seemed like a cruel fate, an insurmountable obstacle, but with the help of her teacher, Anne Sullivan, Helen learned to communicate, to read, to write, and eventually to inspire millions with her words and activism. Her adversity became her strength. She once said, "Character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, ambition inspired, and success achieved." Closer to our own daily lives, I once knew a man who grew up in extreme poverty. As a child, he often went to bed hungry. He wore second-hand clothes and was embarrassed by what he lacked. But instead of letting those hardships define him, he used them as fuel. He studied harder, worked longer, and built a business that not only provided for his family, but also created jobs for others. Looking back, he said something powerful. "If I had grown up rich, I do not think I would have had the hunger to fight for more. My struggles made me who I am." This is the wisdom older generations want us to understand. Adversity is not there to break you. It is there to build you. Just as fire refines gold, hardship refines character. The strongest people you admire are not strong because life was easy. They are strong because life was hard, and they endured. Think of athletes. No champion is made without grueling training, injuries, and setbacks. The pain of the process strengthens the body and sharpens the mind. Life is no different. Every trial is like training for the soul. It may not feel like it at the time, but every challenge prepares you for something greater. But here's the key. Adversity only becomes a teacher if we allow it. Some people let hardship make them bitter. Others let it make them better. The difference is perspective. When you see adversity as punishment, You suffer twice, once from the event itself, and once from your belief that life is unfair. But when you see adversity as training, you still suffer, but you also grow. You carry away lessons, strength, and wisdom that ease future battles. Consider Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. He endured unimaginable suffering in concentration camps. Yet he wrote in his famous book, Man's Search for Meaning, that even in the worst conditions, humans can choose how to respond. He said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." His adversity taught him and the world that meaning can be found even in suffering, and that inner freedom is something no one can take away. So how do we embrace adversity as a teacher in our own lives? First, pause and ask, what is this trying to teach me? Instead of fighting the hardship, look for the lesson. Maybe it is patience. Maybe it is courage. Maybe it is learning to let go. Second, remember that pain is temporary, but the growth it creates is lasting. Muscles ache after training, but the strength remains. Third, share your story. Often, the lessons you learn in hardship are not just for you. They are meant to inspire others. I once met a woman who had survived cancer. She told me, "I would not wish my illness on anyone, but I also would not erase it from my life. It taught me to love deeper, to live slower, and to appreciate every day." Her adversity became her greatest teacher. Older people smile when they share this lesson because they know something we often forget. Storms do not last forever, but the person you become after the storm that lasts. You emerge changed, wiser, stronger. You may carry scars, but those scars are proof of survival, not weakness. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by adversity, remember this is not punishment. This is preparation. This is training. And one day you will look back and realize that the very mountain you thought was placed to block you was actually placed to build you. Because adversity is not here to destroy you. It is here to reveal you, to show you the strength you always had but never needed to use until now. When you ask older people what truly matters in life, their answers are rarely about money, fame, or status. Instead, they talk about mornings with family, laughter with friends, moments of peace under the shade of a tree, or the joy of a simple meal shared with someone they love. What they have discovered after years of chasing and striving is that happiness is not a prize waiting at the end of a long race. It is something found along the way, and the key that unlocks it is gratitude. So many of us believe happiness will come when we land that job, when we buy that house, when we travel to that destination, when we meet the right person. But older voices smile knowingly at this mindset because they have lived long enough to see how that, when always moves further away, you achieve one goal and instantly the next appears. You buy the house, but now you want a bigger one. You find the partner, but now you want perfection. The horizon keeps shifting and happiness keeps running ahead. But gratitude pulls it back into the present. Gratitude says, I have enough, right here, right now. Gratitude does not deny ambition or stop us from growing. It simply reminds us not to miss the joy of the current moment while chasing future dreams. Consider a simple story. I once knew a man who worked tirelessly, chasing wealth his whole life. He succeeded: big house, expensive car, enviable career. Yet, when asked if he was happy, he hesitated. Later, when illness struck and he had to slow down, he discovered happiness not in his possessions, but in the simple ritual of sitting on his porch every morning, drinking coffee while listening to birds sing. He admitted, I spent decades chasing happiness only to realize it was in my mornings all along. This is why gratitude is so powerful. It shifts our attention. Without gratitude, our minds focus on what is missing. With gratitude, we focus on what is already present. And where attention goes, emotion follows. If you spend all your energy thinking about what you lack, you will feel empty. If you spend your energy noticing what you have, you will feel full. Think about Viktor Frankl, who survived concentration camps. Even in the darkest environment, he found gratitude in small things. A sunrise, a kind word, a memory of love. That gratitude gave him the strength to endure. If gratitude can create light in the darkest prison, imagine what it can do in your everyday life. Happiness and gratitude are also deeply connected to perspective. Two people can live the same life, same house, same job, same circumstances, yet one feels miserable while the other feels blessed. The difference is not the situation, it is the lens. One sees lack, the other sees abundance. Gratitude changes the lens. Older people often recall moments they did not realize were precious until they became memories. Their children's laughter, dinners at a crowded table, late-night talks with friends. They look back and say, "That was happiness. I just did not see it at the time." And that is the danger. We only see the value of moments once they are gone. Gratitude helps us see it while it is happening. Let us take an example from everyday life. A young woman once kept a gratitude journal, writing down 3 things she was thankful for each night. At first, they seemed small: a good cup of tea, a call with my mom, finishing my work on time. But over months, she noticed her mindset shift. Instead of dwelling on stress, she started scanning her day for blessings. Slowly, her happiness increased, not because her circumstances changed, but because her perspective did. Gratitude does not mean ignoring hardship. Life will always have struggles. But gratitude balances the picture. It says, yes, this is hard, but look at what is still good. It is not about pretending everything is perfect. It is about acknowledging that even in difficulty, there are things worth appreciating. Think of a stormy day. Without gratitude, you see only the rain, the inconvenience, the gloom. With gratitude, you notice the way the rain nourishes the earth, the coziness of being indoors, the reminder that storms pass, same day, different lens. So how do we practice this lesson? First, start small. Each day, pause and notice 3 things you are grateful for. It could be as simple as a smile from a stranger, a meal that filled you, or the fact that you made it through another day. Second, express it. Don't just feel gratitude, say it. Tell people you appreciate them. Thank life for small blessings. Gratitude unspoken is like a gift left unopened. Third, practice presence. Instead of rushing through moments, pause to feel them. That hug, that laugh, that quiet sunset, let it sink in. Older people often say their happiest moments were not grand events but small, everyday experiences they took time to savor. They remind us that happiness does not always look like fireworks. It often looks like candlelight, quiet, steady, warm. So the next time you find yourself thinking, "I will be happy when," stop. Look around. What do you have now that you once prayed for? Who is beside you that you might be taking for granted? What small joys are waiting to be noticed? Happiness is not waiting in the future, it is woven into the present, hidden in gratitude. Because the truth is simple, happiness and gratitude are inseparable. You cannot be truly happy without being grateful, and you cannot be truly grateful without finding happiness. So do not wait. Choose gratitude now, and happiness will follow. If there is one final lesson older generations want to leave behind, it is this: everything changes. The seasons of life shift. People come and go. Circumstances rise and fall. Nothing stays the same forever. And yet, while change can feel unsettling, even frightening, it is also what makes life rich and meaningful. Without change, there would be no growth. Without resilience, we would crumble under its weight. And without legacy, all the lessons we learned would vanish instead of lighting the way for others. When we are young, we often resist change. We want stability, predictability, control. We hold tightly to the way things are, terrified of losing what we know. But older voices remind us, resisting change is like standing in the ocean and trying to stop the tide. You can fight, but the waves will still come. The wiser path is to learn how to move with the water, to bend instead of break, to adapt instead of cling. Take a story from nature. Consider the bamboo plant. Unlike a rigid oak tree that may snap in a storm, bamboo bends with the wind. It sways, it yields, but it does not break. In fact, its flexibility makes it one of the strongest plants in the world. This is resilience, the ability to move with life's storms and still stand tall when they pass. Older people understand this because they have endured countless storms and discovered that resilience, not resistance, is the key to survival. History also shows us this. Think of Nelson Mandela once again, or Mahatma Gandhi, or Malala Yousafzai. Each faced immense change and adversity. They could have surrendered to despair, but instead they adapted and stood resilient. Their resilience not only carried them through, but created legacies that continue to inspire generations. They remind us that legacy is not just about wealth or accomplishments. It is about impact. It is about the lives you touch, the lessons you pass on, the values you live by so strongly that others remember them long after you are gone. On a more personal level, I once knew a woman who spent most of her life as a homemaker. She was not famous, she was not wealthy, but her resilience was remarkable. She raised 5 children, cared for aging parents, endured financial struggles, and still found joy in small things: gardening, storytelling, and laughter. When she passed away, her legacy was not written in headlines, but in the lives of her children and grandchildren, who carried her lessons of kindness, patience, and strength forward. She showed that legacy is not measured in the size of your stage, but in the depth of your impact on the people around you. Change also teaches us humility. It reminds us that we are not in control of everything. Jobs disappear. Relationships shift. Health changes. Dreams evolve. But resilience is what allows us to rise again. It whispers, "You have been through this before. You will get through it again." And legacy asks, what will you leave behind from this experience? Older people often say they regret not the changes that came, but the times they resisted them. They regret holding too tightly to what no longer served them, or being too afraid to start anew. They smile and say, life does not punish you with change. It invites you to grow, and that is the perspective worth carrying forward. So how do we embrace this lesson in our lives? First, accept that change is inevitable. Instead of fearing it, expect it. Prepare your heart and mind to bend with the seasons. Second, cultivate resilience. Strengthen yourself not by avoiding challenges, but by walking through them, learning from them, and carrying those lessons forward. Third, think about your legacy not in grand terms, but in everyday choices. What values do you want to pass down? What lessons do you want people to remember about you? Legacy is built in daily actions, not distant dreams. There is a beautiful story about Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite. One day, a newspaper mistakenly published his obituary while he was still alive, describing him as a man who profited from creating weapons of destruction. Shocked, Nobel realized this was not the legacy he wanted to leave behind. From that moment, he dedicated his fortune to creating the Nobel Prizes, rewarding contributions to peace, science, and literature. His choice transformed how the world remembers him. That is the power of legacy. It is never too late to shape it. So as we close this series of lessons, hold this truth close: life will change. Sometimes suddenly, sometimes slowly, but always inevitably, resilience will carry you through those changes, teaching you to bend without breaking. And your legacy, big or small, will be the echo of your choices, your kindness, your courage, and your love. Older voices, with their quiet wisdom, want us to remember that our lives are not defined only by what we achieve, but by what we contribute, by how we face change, by how we endure, and by how we leave the world a little better than we found it. So when change comes knocking, do not hide. Open the door, walk with resilience, and ask yourself, what legacy am I creating today? Because in the end, change is certain, resilience is possible, and legacy is eternal. As we come to the end of this journey through the most honest life lessons, let us pause for a moment and breathe in the wisdom we have gathered. 12 lessons, woven from the voices of those who have lived long lives, have guided us through truths that are simple yet profound, painful yet healing, quiet yet transformative. Each lesson is like a candle, lighting a path we often stumble along in darkness. Together, they form a map not to a perfect life, but to a meaningful one. Let us take a moment to revisit them, not as distant ideas, but as truths you can carry in your own heart. First, we learn that rejection is not the end. It is redirection. Every no you have ever received may have been pushing you toward a better yes. The second lesson taught us that darkness is not always burial. It is planting. The struggles you endure may be the soil from which your greatest growth emerges. Third, we discovered that comparison steals joy. Just as the sun and moon shine at their own times, so do we. Your timing is your own, and no one else's. The fourth lesson reminded us that self-talk shapes reality. The whispers you repeat to yourself are far more powerful than the shouts of others. Choose them wisely. The fifth showed us that choices create change. You are always one decision away from a new life. The sixth encouraged us to see mistakes and worries not as curses, but as teachers. Mistakes prove you are trying, and most of your worries never come true. The seventh lesson turned our focus to relationships and boundaries. Not everyone is meant to walk with you forever. Learn who to hold close and who to let go. The eighth revealed that fear and nerves are not signs of weakness but of growth. If you are nervous, you are doing something that matters. The ninth taught us that time, patience, and perspective transform everything. What feels unbearable now may one day become a memory that shaped you for the better. The 10th lesson was perhaps the hardest. Adversity is not punishment but training. The fire that burns also refines. The 11th lifted us into gratitude. Happiness is not a distant prize. It is hidden in the present moment, unlocked through thankfulness. And finally, the 12th brought us to change, resilience, and legacy. Change is inevitable. Resilience is the bridge that carries us, and legacy is the gift we leave behind. Together, these lessons tell us a story. They remind us that life is not about chasing perfection or controlling every outcome. It is about walking with courage, learning from pain, finding joy in small things, protecting your peace, and leaving behind love in whatever form you can. I once asked an elderly man what advice he would give to the younger generation. He paused, smiled, and said, "Don't waste your time trying to be someone else. Live your life, not theirs." In the end, it is not about how far you went, but about how true you were. That is the essence of these lessons. They are not meant to give you rules, but reminders, not commands, but encouragements. So as you close this video and return to your own life, ask yourself, which of these lessons do you need most right now? Is it to stop comparing and start focusing on your own path? Is it to see a rejection not as the end, but as redirection? Is it to shift your self-talk into words of kindness? Or maybe it is to set boundaries, embrace patience, or practice gratitude. Whatever it is, hold on to it. Let it sink in. Let it guide you. And remember this, you do not need to master all 12 at once. Life is not a checklist to complete. It is a journey to walk. Some lessons will resonate today, others tomorrow, and still others years from now. That is okay. Wisdom does not rush. It arrives exactly when you are ready. Older voices often end their reflections with this comforting truth. Some of the best days of your life have not even happened yet. Imagine that for a moment. The laughter you will share, the love you will feel, the milestones you will reach, they are still waiting for you. No matter how heavy today feels, tomorrow carries promise. So keep walking, keep learning, keep choosing growth. And when life feels overwhelming, return to these lessons. Let them remind you that rejection redirects, darkness plants, comparison steals, self-talk shapes, choices transform, mistakes teach, boundaries protect, fear guides, time heals, adversity trains, gratitude fills, and legacy lasts. Because at the end of it all, wisdom is not about avoiding pain or chasing endless success. It is about embracing change, enduring with resilience, and leaving behind a legacy of love and light. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May these lessons not just fill your mind, but inspire your steps. And as you move forward, may you carry with you the quiet, enduring wisdom that life itself is the greatest teacher of all. Sparkles live fully, love deeply, learn constantly, and one day your own lessons will become someone else's guiding light. Sparkles,